There's something almost hypnotic about volcanoes. We've built entire mythologies around them. Gods of fire, gates to the underworld, mountains that breathe. And maybe that's because deep down, we understand that volcanoes don't operate on our schedule. They don't warn us when they're hungry. They simply wake up, and everything in their path pays the price. Most volcanic eruptions, though, at least give us time. Weeks of tremors, rising gas emissions, swelling ground. Scientists can evacuate towns, clear highways, move livestock to safety. It's not perfect, but it's something. The worst eruptions, however, are the ones that skip the warnings entirely, the ones that go from dormant to deadly in hours. That's exactly what happened on January 17, 2002, in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. At 5 in the morning, fissures suddenly tore through the slopes of Mount Nyiragongo, a volcano that had been quietly bubbling for decades, home to the largest lava lake on the planet. Within minutes, 25 million cubic meters of magma began pouring downhill at 60 kilometers per hour. Not the slow, creeping lava flows you see in documentaries. This was a flood, a molten flood racing toward a city of nearly 1 million people, and there was almost nothing anyone could do to stop it. By the time the sun rose fully over the city of Goma, 14 villages had been erased from the map. The town itself had been sliced in half by rivers of cooling rock. 150 people were dead. Hundreds of thousands were displaced. And the world was left asking the same question that always follows disasters like this. Why didn't anyone see it coming? The answer is complicated. Nyiragongo isn't like other volcanoes. Its lava is unlike anything else on Earth. Its location, in one of the most conflict-torn regions on the planet, makes monitoring nearly impossible. And its history is written in tragedy after tragedy, each one a warning that went unheeded. This is the story of a mountain that refuses to stay quiet, and a city that has no choice but to live in its shadow. To understand why the 2002 eruption was so catastrophic, you first have to understand what makes Nyiragongo different from almost every other volcano on Earth. Because this isn't just another mountain with a bad temper, this is something else entirely. Nyiragongo sits in the African Rift Valley, part of Virunga National Park, a region so ecologically significant that UNESCO classified it as a World Heritage Site back in 1979. The volcano rises 3,470 meters above sea level, its slopes covered in dense tropical forest that gives way to barren rock near the summit. From certain angles, it almost looks peaceful, a giant sleeping under a blanket of green. But 20 kilometers away sits the city of Goma, close enough that on clear days, residents can see the faint glow of something burning at the top of that mountain. Something that never stops burning. Of the 1,521 active volcanoes scattered across our planet, only 7 contain permanent lava lakes. Nyiragongo's is the largest. Picture a lake, except instead of water, it's filled with molten rock heated to over 1,200 degrees Celsius. This lake is the visible top of a magma column rising from a chamber deep within the Earth, a direct pipeline to the planet's interior. Most people will never see anything like it in their lifetime, the few who have described it as staring into another world. But here's what makes Nyiragongo truly terrifying. Its lava isn't like the lava you've seen in documentaries, those slow-moving orange rivers that creep downhill while camera crews film from a safe distance. Nyiragongo's magma contains unusually low silica content, which makes it incredibly fluid, almost like water compared to the thick syrup of typical volcanic lava. When this stuff escapes the crater, it doesn't crawl, it runs. Speeds of 60 kilometers per hour have been recorded. That's faster than most people can drive through a city, let alone run from. The region learned this the hard way in 1977, when fissures opened on Nyiragongo's slopes and lava poured into surrounding villages, with almost no warning. Over 600 people died in that eruption. Entire communities were buried under rivers of cooling rock before anyone could organize an evacuation. It was a tragedy that should have changed everything about how the region prepared for volcanic disasters. But Goma kept growing. The city's population swelled through the 1980s and 1990s, pushing closer to the volcano's base. People needed somewhere to live. Farmland was fertile near the mountain. Economic pressures don't pause for geological hazards. By the turn of the millennium, nearly 1 million people were living within striking distance of a volcano that had already proven exactly what it was capable of. And the lava lake kept bubbling, rising, waiting, January 17th, 2002, 5 o'clock in the morning. Most of Goma was still asleep, the city quiet under the pre-dawn darkness. Fishermen on Lake Kivu were preparing their boats. Families were stirring in villages scattered along the volcano's lower slopes. It was an ordinary Thursday, indistinguishable from any other. And then the mountain cracked open. Without warning, fissures tore through Nyiragongo's southern flanks. Not at the summit, where the lava lake had been bubbling for years, but along the slopes themselves. These weren't small fractures. They were gaping wounds in the earth, and from them poured 25 million cubic meters of molten rock. The lava didn't trickle, it surged. 60 kilometers per hour, racing downhill toward populated areas with a speed that defied everything people thought they knew about volcanic eruptions. Up at the crater, the lava lake began draining like a bathtub, with the plug pulled. The magma that had been contained for years was now escaping through those new fissures, emptying so rapidly that the crater floor collapsed in on itself. The entire geometry of the volcano was changing in real time, and down below, people were only just beginning to realize something was wrong. The Goma Volcanological Observatory sounded the alarm, but alarms only matter if there's time to respond. The lava was moving faster than evacuation plans could unfold. Villages in the direct path had minutes, not hours. 14 of them would be completely destroyed before the sun climbed fully above the horizon. Homes, churches, schools, all swallowed by rivers of glowing rock that hardened into black stone as they cooled. Goma itself didn't escape. The lava flows reached the city and carved straight through its center, splitting the town in two. Streets that had been filled with market stalls and motorcycle taxis were now buried under meters of volcanic rock. The main runway at Goma International Airport was bisected, cutting off one of the region's critical evacuation routes. For those trying to flee, options were vanishing as quickly as the lava was advancing. By the time the flows finally slowed, 150 people were dead. Some had been caught in their homes, unable to escape in time. Others died in the chaos of evacuation, crushed in crowds or trapped by blocked roads. Hundreds of thousands more were displaced, streaming out of the city with whatever possessions they could carry, not knowing if they would have homes to return to. The international community watched in horror. Aid organizations scrambled to respond, and scientists were left grappling with a disturbing question. Why had there been no warning? Nyiragongo had been monitored, the lava lake had been observed, but the fissures that opened that morning gave almost no advance notice, no sustained seismic swarms, no dramatic ground deformation, just sudden rupture, sudden catastrophe, sudden loss. The 2002 eruption didn't just destroy villages and divide a city. It exposed a terrifying truth about Nyiragongo. This volcano doesn't play by the rules, and predicting its next move would require getting closer than anyone had ever gone before. In July 2003, over a year after the disaster, a small team began the climb back up Nyiragongo. They weren't professional volcanologists, at least not all of them. The group included an electrician, a geologist, and a computer expert, all members of the Geneva Volcanological Society. Volcano enthusiasts who had spent years exploring dangerous terrain around the world. Now they were being invited to help with something far more serious than adventure. Jacques Durieux, a volcanologist coordinating research between the United Nations and the Goma Observatory, needed people who could handle the brutal conditions inside the crater. He needed people willing to descend into the mouth of a volcano that had just killed 150 people. What they found at the summit was sobering. The eruption had completely transformed the crater's interior. Where the lava lake had once sat relatively high, there was now a gaping hole nearly 1,000 meters deep. The lake had reappeared at the bottom, barely visible through thick clouds of toxic gas. Watching it bubble and glow from the crater rim, the team understood immediately why they were there. Someone had to get closer. Someone had to gather the data that might prevent the next disaster. But 2004 brought catastrophe of a different kind. On the very day the team arrived at the summit for their first major scientific mission, they were ambushed by 40 armed rebels. Every piece of equipment was stolen. After exchanging gunfire, the scientists and volunteers were left stranded at 3,470 meters with nothing. Months of preparation gone in minutes. The mission collapsed before it even began. They came back anyway. In 2005, the team returned to Nyiragongo. beginning what would become a decade of continuous research. Villagers from Kibati carried equipment 1,500 meters up the slopes. At the summit, temperatures dropped sharply, and an imposing column of acidic gas transformed the crater rim into a suffocating trap. Conditions that would send most people running became routine for this team. The descent into the crater required navigating 200 meters of unstable slopes to reach a platform of ancient hardened lava, a vestige from when the lake had been much higher. From there, they collected gas samples, measured temperatures, and documented every change in the crater's morphology. The numbers were staggering. Nyiragongo was belching 70,000 tons of sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere every single day. The acidic emissions were poisoning water supplies on the volcano's slopes, affecting villages that had already suffered enough. And the lake kept rising. By 2006, it had climbed over 200 meters from its post-eruption low. Rafts of cooled lava drifted across its surface while incandescent fountains burst between them. At times, the magma rose with such force that it spilled over the edges of its containment, flooding the surrounding terraces with fresh, molten rock. The pressure was building. Everyone could see it. The question was no longer whether Nyiragongo would erupt again, but when, and whether anyone would see it coming this time. By 2010, the lava lake had reached its highest level since the 2002 eruption. The team that had been climbing Nyiragongo for years now faced a crater transformed. The lake stretched 240 meters across, containing an estimated 8 million cubic meters of molten rock. It was hemmed in by a low wall built up from countless lava ejections, a fragile barrier barely 10 meters high, separating that churning mass from the terraces where researchers made their camp. This mission carried an ambition that bordered on reckless. For the first time, the team planned to reach the actual shore of the new lake and collect samples directly from its edge. The descent required removing unstable rocks to prevent deadly falls, navigating vertical drops with hundreds of kilograms of equipment, and trusting ropes anchored into volcanic rock that could crumble without warning. When Mark Caley finally stepped onto the narrow strip of cooled lava at the lake's edge, he became the first human to stand on the shore of the world's largest lava lake since its rebirth. A wild dream, years in the making, realized in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. But Nyiragongo wasn't finished reminding them who was in charge. In 2011, the team returned to install a camera that would film the crater's activity around the clock. The work took 3 days of dangerous positioning on exposed rock faces. That night, as they slept on the terrace, a deep grumble rose from the bottom of the crater. They scrambled from their tents into dense clouds of gas escaping from below. The lake had collapsed. In less than a minute, the surface had dropped 25 meters. Massive bubbles of gas, 40 meters across, burst through the magma. Everyone watching thought the same thing. This is it. This is the eruption. Dario Tedesco contacted the Goma observatory. No unusual seismic activity had been recorded. No lava flows were visible on the slopes. 1 million cubic meters of magma had simply vanished, swallowed back into the volcano's depths by mechanisms still poorly understood. The team spent the night watching, waiting, barely breathing. The eruption never came, but the message was clear. Nyiragongo operates on its own terms. The years that followed brought new obstacles. In 2012, the M23 rebellion made missions impossible. The conflict lasted 4 years, during which seismographs placed around the volcano were destroyed and monitoring efforts collapsed. When the team finally returned in 2016, Goma had changed. The city's population had swelled past 1 million, with new construction spreading toward the volcano's base. Evacuation routes that were already inadequate had become even more complicated. Today, researchers continue their work with new technology. Thermal cameras, ultra-precise GPS equipment, and 3D mapping have replaced some of the older methods. But the fundamental challenge remains unchanged. Nyiragongo gives almost no warning before it strikes, and over 1 million people live close enough to see its glow at night, building their lives on ground that has betrayed them before, and will almost certainly betray them again. For over 2 decades now, teams of scientists and volunteers have descended into Nyiragongo's crater, gathering data that previous generations could only dream of. They've measured gas compositions, tracked lava lake levels, photographed morphological changes, and installed monitoring equipment under conditions that would break most people. The collaboration between professional volcanologists and passionate enthusiasts has produced thousands of observations, samples, and photographs. An unprecedented database for understanding one of Earth's most dangerous volcanoes. But here's the uncomfortable truth. We still can't predict when Nyiragongo will erupt again. We can watch the lake rise. We can measure the gases. We can track seismic activity. But the 2002 eruption proved that this volcano doesn't always announce its intentions. Fissures can tear open with almost no warning. Lava can race downhill faster than people can run. And a city of over 1 million people sits just 20 kilometers away, growing larger every year, spreading closer to the mountain that has already taken so much. The people of Goma live with this reality every day. They rebuild on top of cooled lava flows. They raise children in the shadow of a volcano that has erupted twice in living memory. They go about their lives knowing that the ground beneath them is anything but stable. It's not ignorance or recklessness, it's simply the impossible math of survival in a region where there are no safe options. Nyiragongo hasn't revealed all its secrets yet. The magma chamber beneath it remains poorly understood. The mechanisms that trigger its eruptions are still being studied. But thanks to the tireless work of those who keep climbing back into that crater, we know more today than we did in 2002. More than we did in 1977. Each mission adds another piece to the puzzle, another data point that might one day save lives. The mountain will erupt again. That's not pessimism, it's geology. The only question is whether we'll be ready when it does. And honestly, after everything we've seen, can anyone truly be ready for Nyiragongo?